History remembers great rulers for the empires they built, for the laws they wrote, for the golden ages they ushered in. But there's another kind of ruler, the ones whose names were whispered in fear long after their deaths. Kings who turned entire civilizations into battlefields. Emperors who believed mercy was weakness. Conquerors whose victories were measured not by the lands they gained, but by the mountains of bones they left behind. Some burned cities simply to make an example. Others displayed the bodies of their enemies to terrify entire nations. For these rulers, fear was more powerful than loyalty, and cruelty became the language of their reign. Centuries have passed. Their palaces have crumbled. Their armies have vanished into history. Yet their names still survive. Not because they ruled, but because the world never forgot what they were capable of. Welcome to Age of Titans, where the greatest legends, the darkest empires, and the most unforgettable figures of history come back to life. If you are fascinated by ancient civilizations, legendary conquerors, and the stories that shaped our world, make sure to subscribe and join thousands of history lovers on this journey through time. Today, we are counting down the 10 most savage ancient rulers. This ranking is not based only on the number of battles they won. It is based on the fear they inspired, the brutality they unleashed, and the terrifying legacy they carved into history itself. Some ruled through brilliant military strategy. Others ruled through unimaginable violence. But every single one of them changed the world forever. From mad emperors to butcher kings. From conquerors who erased entire cities from the map, to rulers whose cruelty became the stuff of nightmares for 1,000 years. Number 10 still rules from the shadows of history. Let's begin. Number 10, Ashurnasirpal II, the first terrorist. Long before the word terror was ever written down, long before modern warfare and psychological operations had names, there was a king who understood one brutal truth. Fear is the most powerful weapon ever forged. Steel can kill a man. Armies can conquer a city. But fear can break an entire civilization before a single soldier marches through its gates. Ashurnasirpal II ruled the Neo-Assyrian Empire nearly 3,000 years ago. He inherited a kingdom that was strong, but he wanted more. He wanted absolute dominance. He wanted his enemies to surrender the moment they heard his name. And he achieved exactly that. This man did not simply defeat his enemies. He turned their destruction into theater. He built the city of Nimrud, a magnificent capital with towering walls and massive gates. But the gates were not just for defense. They were galleries of horror. Stone reliefs showing enemies being flayed alive. Prisoners impaled on stakes. Captives being led by hooks through their jaws. This was not art for art's sake. This was a warning. Ashurnasirpal wrote his own annals. His own words survive to this day, and reading them feels like staring into the abyss. He described one campaign where he captured a rebel city. His soldiers cut off the hands and feet of the defenders. They sliced off their ears and noses. They gouged out their eyes. The bodies were piled into a pyramid outside the city gates. Then Ashurnasirpal writes, and I quote, "I flayed all the chief men who had revolted, and I covered the pillar with their skins. Some I walled up alive in the masonry. Others I impaled on stakes around the pillar. He skinned men alive and used their flesh as decoration. He buried others alive inside the walls of their own city. He turned human beings into building materials. But the most terrifying part? This was not rage. This was not a moment of anger. This was policy. Ashurnasirpal understood that a reputation for unspeakable cruelty was worth more than 100,000 soldiers. Word spread. Cities heard what happened to those who resisted. And when his armies approached, the gates swung open before a single arrow was fired. He boasted that he was king of the world, king without rival, king of the four quarters of the universe. And for a time, nobody dared to argue. His empire expanded. His treasury overflowed. His palace at Nimrud was one of the wonders of the ancient world. Feasts he hosted lasted for days. 10,000 guests were fed at his inauguration banquet. Gold, wine, music, dancing. all of it built on a foundation of absolute terror. Ashurnasirpal too died in his bed, old and powerful. He was never overthrown. He was never defeated in battle. The man who turned human skin into wallpaper left this world peacefully. But here's the question that history forces us to ask. Can a man who built his empire on such cruelty truly be called great? Or was he simply the first to perfect a dark art that would echo through the ages? Because the rulers who follow him on this list, they learned from his example. And they took it much, much further. Number 9. Qin Shi Huang, the man who wanted to live forever. Some rulers conquer nations. Others conquer death itself. Or at least, they try. Imagine being so powerful that you look at the natural order of the universe. Birth, life, death, and you say, "No, this does not apply to me." That was Qin Shi Huang. He was the first emperor of China, the man who unified warring kingdoms into a single empire, the man who began the Great Wall, the man whose tomb is guarded by thousands of terracotta warriors, each one unique, each one ready for battle even in the afterlife. But before he became a legend, he was just a boy who ascended the throne of the Qin state at the age of 13. A boy surrounded by enemies, both foreign and domestic. He grew up fast. He grew up ruthless. By the time he was 38, he had conquered all rival states and declared himself Shi Huangdi, the first emperor. He did not see himself as just a king. He saw himself as the beginning of a new era, a new cosmic order. Everything before him was chaos. Everything after him would be perfect unity under his absolute control. He standardized weights and measures. He standardized the width of card axles. He standardized the written language. And he also standardized obedience. Qin Shi Huang was obsessed with order, and anything that threatened order was eliminated. Literally, when his scholars criticized his policies, he did not imprison them. He did not exile them. He buried them alive. The historical records tell us that 460 Confucian scholars were executed in a single purge, buried in pits, their knowledge considered dangerous to his vision of absolute control. But the scholars were not his only victims. He burned books, thousands of them, every text that did not align with his philosophy, every scroll that contained alternative ideas, every historical record that painted previous dynasties in a positive light. All of it went into the flames. He wanted history to begin with him. He wanted human knowledge to begin with him. He wanted to erase everything that came before and build a new world from scratch. The Great Wall began under his command, a wonder of the world, but it was built on the bones of forced laborers. Hundreds of thousands of them, men, women, criminals, peasants. They worked until they dropped. Their bodies became part of the wall itself. Their ghosts are said to haunt it to this day. And then there was the Mercury. Qin Shi Huang was terrified of death. He sent expeditions across the seas to find the elixir of immortality. Alchemists and sorcerers filled his court, each one promising to unlock the secret of eternal life. When they failed, he had them killed. But he did not stop searching. He drank potions made of cinnabar and mercury, believing they would preserve his body. The very substances meant to make him immortal were slowly poisoning him. His tomb is a miracle and a mystery. Ancient texts describe an underground palace with rivers of flowing mercury, a ceiling mapped with constellations, a floor modeled after the empire he ruled. Crossbows were rigged to fire automatically at anyone who dared enter. The tomb has never been fully excavated. The Chinese government knows where it is, but they will not open it. The mercury levels are too dangerous. Even in death, Qin Shi Huang kills those who come too close. He died in 210 BC on a journey through his empire. He was 49 years old. His body was carried back to the capital in a cart filled with rotten fish to hide the smell of decay. The man who wanted to live forever rotted in the summer heat. But his empire survived him. The structure he built lasted for 2,000 years. China as a unified concept, as a single civilization, exists because of this man. The question is, what is the cost of unity? How many bodies must be buried beneath a nation before its foundations are strong enough to stand forever? Qin Shi Huang's answer was simple. as many as it takes. Number 8. Caligula, the god who walked among men. Power does not corrupt. Power reveals. Give a man absolute control over life and death, and you will discover exactly who he always was underneath the titles and the manners. Gaius Caesar Germanicus was born into the most powerful family in human history, the Julio-Claudian dynasty. His great-grandfather was Augustus, the founder of the Roman Empire. His father, Germanicus, was the most beloved general in the Roman world. As a child, Gaius was the empire's mascot. He wore a tiny soldier's uniform and marched alongside the legions. The troops adored him. They gave him a nickname that would follow him into legend: Caligula, Little Boots. Nobody suspected that the cute child in miniature military sandals would grow up to become a name synonymous with madness and depravity. When Tiberius, his great-uncle and predecessor, finally died, Caligula became emperor. The Roman people celebrated. They believed the nightmare was over. Tiberius had been paranoid, cruel, reclusive. Caligula was young. He was handsome. He was the son of the beloved Germanicus. The first months of his reign were golden. He gave money to the people. He recalled exiles. He threw games and festivals. Rome breathed a sigh of relief. And then something changed. Ancient historians say Caligula fell ill, a severe fever that nearly killed him. When he emerged from his sickbed, he was different. Something inside him had snapped, or perhaps something inside him had been set free. From that point forward, Caligula ruled as if he were not just an emperor, but a god. He claimed divine status while still alive. He built a temple to himself. He placed a statue of his own face inside the Temple of Jerusalem, nearly triggering a rebellion. He would stand between the statues of Castor and Pollux, waiting for worshippers to approach him as a living deity. He appeared in public dressed as Jupiter, as Hercules, as Venus. He blurred the line between man and myth. And then there was the cruelty. Caligula executed rivals without hesitation. He forced parents to watch their sons die, then invited them to dinner and expected them to laugh at his jokes. He fed prisoners to wild beasts because buying meat for the animals was too expensive. He had a favorite horse named Incitatus. He gave the horse a marble stable, an ivory manger, purple blankets, and a collar of precious stones. He planned to make Incitatus a consul, the highest political office in Rome. Whether this was madness or a calculated insult to the Senate, we will never know. His sexual appetites were legendary. He took wives from their husbands at dinner parties, then returned them with comments about their performance. He committed incest with his sisters openly, publicly, as if daring anyone to object. He once lined up his legions on a beach in Gaul, declared war on the sea god Neptune, and ordered his soldiers to collect seashells as spoils of victory. Seashells, the most powerful military on earth, the army that had conquered the Mediterranean world, was reduced to picking up shells from a beach because their emperor wanted to mock them, or because he genuinely believed he could fight the ocean. The line between genius and madness was invisible to Caligula. Perhaps it never existed at all. He loved to whisper threats into the ears of his closest advisors. "I only have to give one nod," he would say, "and your heads will be cut off on the spot." He complained about the Roman people, wishing they all had a single neck, so he could cut it with one stroke of his sword. The Senate was terrified. The Praetorian Guard was humiliated. The people were exhausted. In the end, it was his own guards who killed him. A conspiracy formed in the shadows. In a corridor of the palace, Caligula was stabbed 30 times. His wife was murdered. His infant daughter had her head smashed against a wall. He was 28 years old. He had ruled for less than 4 years. But his name has lived for 2,000 years. Not because he built anything. Not because he conquered new lands. Not because he left behind laws or monuments. He is remembered because he showed the world what happens when a man is given the power of a god with the mind of a child. Caligula was not the deadliest ruler on this list. He was not the most successful conqueror. He was not even the most bloodthirsty. But he may have been the most honest. He did not pretend that power was a burden. He did not hide behind duty or responsibility. He simply took everything he wanted whenever he wanted it. and he dared the world to stop him. Number 7. Cambyses II, the mad king who fought mountains. Some rulers are destroyed by their enemies. Others are destroyed by their own arrogance. Cambyses II, king of Persia, son of Cyrus the Great, was destroyed by something far stranger. He was destroyed by the desert itself. Imagine being the son of the greatest conqueror the world had ever seen. Cyrus the Great built the Persian Empire from nothing, defeated Babylon, freed the Jews, and ruled with a mixture of strength and wisdom. Cambyses inherited that empire, and he spent his entire reign trying to prove he was worthy of it. His first act? The conquest of Egypt. And he succeeded. Cambyses crushed the Egyptian army at the Battle of Pelusium. He captured the pharaoh. He marched into the ancient land of pyramids and temples as a conqueror. He added Egypt to the Persian Empire. But conquering Egypt was not enough. He needed to humiliate it. The Egyptian pharaoh, Psamtik III, was brought before him in chains. Cambyses ordered the pharaoh's daughter to be dressed as a slave and sent to fetch water. He ordered the pharaoh's son to be executed in front of him, along with 2,000 other Egyptian nobles. The Greek historian Herodotus tells us that Psamtik watched this without breaking. But when he saw an old beggar being led past him, the pharaoh wept. Cambyses asked why he wept for a beggar and not for his own children. Psamtik replied that the beggar's suffering was beyond tears. Even Cambyses, for a moment, was said to be moved. But the moment passed. Cambyses stabbed the sacred Apis bull, the living god of the Egyptians. He laughed at their priests. He opened ancient tombs and mocked the mummies inside. He burned their idols and defaced their temples. He was not just a conqueror. He was a desecrator. The Egyptians believed he was cursed for this. They whispered that madness had entered his soul. And then the madness truly began. Cambyses decided to expand his empire further, south into the kingdom of Kush. But the desert was not kind to him. His army ran out of food. Starvation set in. The soldiers drew lots to decide who among them would be eaten. Cannibalism consumed the ranks. The expedition failed, but Cambyses did not learn. He sent another army, 50,000 men. Their mission: destroy the Oracle of Ammonius, an isolated temple in the western desert. The Oracle had insulted him, denied his legitimacy, questioned his right to rule Egypt. The army marched into the sand, and it never returned. The legend says that a massive sandstorm swallowed them whole. 50,000 soldiers, their weapons, their supplies, their horses and camels, all of it buried beneath a sea of sand. For centuries, the lost army of Cambyses was a myth. Until recently, when archaeologists began finding bones and weapons in the Egyptian desert, suggesting the legend might be true. Meanwhile, Cambyses was losing his mind. He murdered his own brother, Bardia. Then he married 2 of his own sisters, breaking Persian law and tradition. He killed the son of his closest advisor with an arrow, just to prove he could hit a target. One day, he asked his courtiers if they thought he was as great as his father, Cyrus. They hesitated. They told him he was greater. But one man, Croesus, the fallen king of Lydia who had become an advisor, told the truth. "You are not like your father," Croesus said. "You lack his wisdom. You lack his mercy." Cambyses tried to kill Croesus on the spot. The guards hit him. By the end of his reign, Cambyses was consumed by paranoia. Every shadow was a threat. Every whisper was treason. He died in 522 BC. The official story says he accidentally stabbed himself with his own sword while mounting his horse. Others say he was assassinated. Others say his wound became infected and rotted him from the inside. The son of the greatest king Persia ever knew, defeated not by armies, but by his own madness. His legacy is a warning. Conquering the world means nothing if you cannot conquer yourself. Number 6. Nero, the artist who burned his canvas. Some men become rulers because they are ambitious. Others because they are born into it. Nero became emperor because his mother murdered the previous one. From the very beginning, his story was written in blood. Nero Claudius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, the last of the Julio-Claudian dynasty. The man whose name would become synonymous with decadence, cruelty, and the fall of Rome itself. His mother, Agrippina, schemed and poisoned her way to power. She married her own uncle, Emperor Claudius. Then she poisoned him with mushrooms. Then she made sure her son Nero, not Claudius's biological son, took the throne. Nero was 16 years old. For a time, he was guided by wise advisors. The philosopher Seneca taught him. The general Burrus managed the empire. Nero wrote poetry, played music, dreamed of being an artist. But the blood of his family was in his veins, and blood will out. He grew tired of his mother's influence. He wanted to rule alone, so he tried to kill her. The first attempt was an elaborate scheme involving a collapsing boat. Agrippina survived. She swam to shore. The second attempt was simpler. Soldiers came to her villa. She bared her stomach and told them to strike the womb that had borne Nero. They did. With his mother dead, Nero was free. What did he do with his freedom? He indulged every desire. He considered himself an artist first, an emperor second. He performed in public as a singer and actor, which scandalized Roman society. He competed in the Olympic Games and won every event he entered, because nobody dared defeat him. He once entered a chariot race, fell off his chariot, and was still declared the winner. But the artist was also a monster. He kicked his pregnant wife, Poppaea, to death in a fit of rage. Then he found a boy who looked like her, castrated him, and married him instead. He executed anyone who threatened his ego. Senators, poets, generals, all fell under suspicion. The philosopher Seneca, who had raised him, was ordered to commit suicide. He slit his wrists in a bath. And then came the fire. In 64 adi rumbarnd. For 6 days and 7 nights, the flames consumed the city. 10 of Rome's 14 districts were destroyed. Thousands died. Hundreds of thousands were left homeless. And Nero watched. The legend says he stood on the roof of his palace, dressed in theatrical costume, playing a lyre and singing about the fall of Troy as the city below him turned to ash. Historians debate whether this actually happened, but the fact that everyone believed it tells you everything you need to know about his reputation. Nero blamed the Christians for the fire. He had them arrested, tortured, and executed in the most creative ways. Some were covered in animal skins and torn apart by dogs. Others were crucified. Others were dipped in oil, impaled on stakes, and set on fire to illuminate his gardens at night. Human torches. He used their burning bodies as garden lights. After the fire, Nero built his golden house. A palace complex so vast, so opulent, so absurdly luxurious that it consumed a massive portion of central Rome. There were artificial lakes, rotating dining rooms, walls covered in gold and precious gems. The entrance had a 120-foot statue of Nero himself. At its dedication, he said, "Now I can finally begin to live like a human being." The Roman people were not amused. Rebellion came. The legions turned against him. The Senate declared him a public enemy. Nero fled Rome and hid in a villa outside the city. As soldiers approached to arrest him, Nero prepared for suicide. He had his secretary help him drive a dagger into his own throat. His last words were, "What an artist dies in me." He was 30 years old. The Julio-Claudian dynasty died with him. Nero was not a conqueror. He did not expand the empire. He did not win great battles. He simply took the most powerful civilization in the ancient world and turned it into his personal playground. And when he was finished playing, Rome was in ashes. Number 5. Attila the Hun, the scourge of God. Some men are born warriors. Some become warriors. Attila was war itself. He came from the east like a storm. No walls could stop him. No army could break him. His name alone made emperors tremble and cities surrender without a fight. The Romans called him Flagellum Dei, the scourge of God. They believed he was sent by heaven to punish their sins. And perhaps they were right. The Huns were a people of the steppe, born on horseback, raised with bows in their hands. They moved faster than any army in history. One day they were a rumor on the horizon. The next day, your city was burning. Attila became their king in 434 AD, ruling alongside his brother Bleda. But Attila did not share power well. He had Bleda murdered. The Huns were his alone. He built an empire that stretched from the steppes of Central Asia to the forests of Germany. But unlike the empires of Rome or Persia, Attila's empire had no cities, no monuments, no written laws. It was an empire held together by one thing: fear. Attila's appearance was as terrifying as his reputation. Historians describe him as short, broad-chested, with a large head, deep-set eyes, and a flat nose. He dressed simply while his warriors wore gold. He ate from wooden plates while his guests used silver. He did not need to impress anyone. His presence was enough. His first target was the Eastern Roman Empire. He swept through the Balkans, burning city after city. The Romans paid him tribute, literally tons of gold, just to go away. Attila took the gold, waited a few years, and came back for more. When the Eastern Emperor stopped paying, Attila attacked with even greater fury. Cities were erased from existence. Populations were massacred or enslaved. But his real ambition lay in the West. In 451 AD, Attila invaded Gaul with an army so massive that the ground shook for days before they arrived. Romans, Visigoths, Franks, Saxons, ancient enemies, united against him. At the Battle of the Catalonian Plains, they fought him to a standstill. It was the first time Attila had been stopped. He retreated, but he was not defeated. The following year, he invaded Italy. City after city fell. Aquileia was destroyed so thoroughly that its location was forgotten for centuries. Refugees fled into the marshes of the Adriatic. Those marshes would later become Venice. The city of Venice was born because of Attila's cruelty. Rome itself seemed doomed. The emperor was helpless. The legions were shattered. Attila marched south, unstoppable. And then something strange happened. Pope Leo I rode out to meet him, unarmed, accompanied only by priests. An old man facing the most feared warrior on earth. No one knows exactly what was said. Some say the Pope promised gold. Some say Attila was superstitious and feared the Pope's spiritual power. Others say disease was spreading through his army and he needed an excuse to withdraw. Whatever the reason, Attila turned back. He spared Rome. The scourge of God showed mercy. But his story was not over. The following year, Attila took a new wife, a young bride named Ildiko. The wedding feast was lavish. Attila drank heavily. He went to bed with his young wife, and he never woke up. In the night, a blood vessel burst. He choked on his own blood. The greatest warrior of his age died in his sleep, drowned in his wedding bed. His warriors mourned him. They cut their faces with swords so that the greatest conqueror would be mourned not with women's tears, but with men's blood. They buried him somewhere in the Hungarian plain. Legend says they diverted a river, buried Attila in the riverbed, and let the water flow back over his grave. Then they killed everyone who knew the location. To this day, his tomb has never been found. Attila the Hun, the man who brought two empires to their knees. The man whose name still means terror, 16 centuries later. The scourge of God. Some men are remembered for what they built. Attila is remembered for what he destroyed. Number 4. Ivan the Terrible, the Mad Tsar. In the West, they call him Ivan the Terrible. But in Russian, the word is Grozny. It does not just mean terrible. It means fearsome, awe-inspiring, a storm given human form. Ivan IV was the first Tsar of all Russia. He transformed a fractured medieval state into a centralized empire. He expanded Russian territory by millions of square miles. He opened trade routes, reformed laws, built cathedrals. And he was also one of the most unstable, paranoid, and violent rulers in human history. His childhood was a horror story. Orphaned at 8, his mother was poisoned, probably by the boyars, the noble families who fought for control of the young prince. Ivan watched his relatives murdered, betrayed, humiliated. He grew up in a palace full of enemies. He learned early that trust was death, and he never forgot it. As a young man, he was promising, intelligent, devout, ambitious. He married Anastasia Romanovna, and by all accounts, he loved her deeply. During her lifetime, his reign was relatively stable. But Anastasia died, and Ivan became convinced she was poisoned. The mask came off. He created the Oprichnina, a personal army of black-clad horsemen. They carried brooms and dog heads on their saddles. The brooms were to sweep away treason. The dog heads were to sniff it out. The Oprichniki were above the law. They answered only to Ivan. They tortured, killed, and plundered with absolute impunity. Entire cities were massacred on suspicion of disloyalty. Novgorod, the second most important city in Russia, was destroyed in a week-long rampage. Men, women, children, priests, no one was spared. Some were tied to sleighs and dragged into the frozen river. Others were roasted alive in enormous frying pans. Thousands died. Ivan watched. Sometimes he participated. He was a man of extreme contradictions. He would spend hours in prayer, prostrating himself before icons, weeping and begging for forgiveness. Then he would walk out of the chapel and order the execution of his enemies. He killed his own son. In a fit of rage, Ivan struck his son and heir, also named Ivan, with his iron staff. The blow crushed the young man's skull. The Tsarevich died 3 days later. Ivan was consumed by grief. He tore at his hair, screamed into the night, refused to eat. But grief did not change him. Ivan was married at least 6 times. Some of his wives died mysteriously. Others were sent to convents. His treatment of women was horrifying even by the standards of his time. He also had a dark sense of humor. When an ambassador from a foreign power displeased him, Ivan had the man's hat nailed to his head. He blinded the architect who designed St. Basil's Cathedral, supposedly to prevent him from ever creating anything so beautiful again. Historians debate the truth of this story, but it has survived for centuries. And stories that survive usually contain a kernel of truth about the man at their center. In his later years, Ivan was a wreck. Paranoid, sick, consumed by superstition. He would consult witches and soothsayers. He searched desperately for a way to atone for his sins while simultaneously committing new ones. He died while playing chess in 1584. The monster of Moscow, the Mad Tsar, the man who built an empire on bones. Russia was larger when he died, stronger, more unified. But the cost? The cost was a nation drenched in blood, a dynasty broken, a population traumatized for generations. Ivan the Terrible. Terrible indeed. Number 3. Timur, the Sword of Islam. He called himself the Sword of Islam, but he slaughtered more Muslims than any crusader ever did. He was a patron of the arts who built pyramids out of human skulls. He was a man who could not shoot an arrow, could not ride a horse properly. Injuries he sustained in his youth left him partially paralyzed on his right side. And yet, he never lost a battle. Timur, Tamerlane, the Iron Cripple. Born in 1336 in what is now Uzbekistan, Timur rose from nothing. He was the son of a minor chief in a world torn apart by the collapse of the Mongol Empire. He began as a bandit, a thief, a mercenary. By the end of his life, he had conquered more territory than anyone since Alexander the Great. His empire stretched from India to the Mediterranean, from Russia to the Persian Gulf. He humiliated the Golden Horde. He crushed the Ottoman Sultan Bayezid in battle and locked him in a cage like an animal. He burned Baghdad to the ground. He destroyed Damascus, one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities on Earth. And he did it all with a brutality that even the Mongols found shocking. When he captured Delhi, his soldiers massacred 100,000 prisoners in a single day. The city was so thoroughly destroyed that it took a century to recover. When he conquered Isfahan, the citizens made the mistake of resisting. Timur ordered every soldier in his army to bring him ahead. His men did the math. If they failed, they would be executed. They did not fail. 70,000 heads. Timur built towers with them. Monuments of skulls that stood for years, visible for miles, warning the world of the price of defiance. His campaigns were not just about conquest. They were performances, theater. He wanted the world to know his name and tremble. He was a Muslim, a devout one by his own understanding. He saw himself as the defender of the faith, and yet his bloodiest atrocities were committed against fellow Muslims. Persia, the heartland of Islamic civilization, never fully recovered from his invasions. But there was another side to Timur. He loved architecture. He built Samarkand into one of the most beautiful cities on earth. He brought the finest artisans, the greatest scholars, the most skilled craftsmen from every conquered land to his capital. You could walk through Samarkand and hear a dozen languages, see wonders from every corner of the known world. Timur did not destroy everything. He took the best of what he conquered and brought it home. He also loved chess, but he found the traditional game too simple. So he invented a new version, played on a larger board with additional pieces. Timur's chess required deeper strategy, more complex thinking. It was a metaphor for his life. He was a paradox, a mass murderer who sponsored poets, a butcher who wept at beautiful music, a conqueror who could quote the Quran and then order the slaughter of an entire city. In 1405, Timur decided to invade China. He gathered his army and marched east. But he was old, almost 70. His body, broken since youth, could not sustain him anymore. He fell ill and died before reaching the border. His empire crumbled quickly, but his legacy did not. The Mughal dynasty of India, which built the Taj Mahal, was founded by Timur's descendants. The fear he instilled in the Middle East reshaped the political map for centuries. Entire cities that he destroyed never rose again. Timur was buried in Samarkand. His tomb is said to bear an inscription, "When I rise from the dead, the world shall tremble." In 1941, Soviet archaeologists opened his tomb. They wanted to study his remains, confirm the legends of his injuries. 2 days later, Nazi Germany invaded the Soviet Union. Superstition, of course, but the timing was unsettling. Timur the Lame, the Iron Cripple, the Scourge of Asia, a man who proved that the body does not need to be strong when the will is absolute. Number 2, Vlad III, the Impaler. Before we reach number 1, we must descend into the Carpathian darkness. We must meet a man whose cruelty was so extreme, so methodical, so creative that his name became the basis for a monster that still haunts our nightmares 500 years later. Dracula. But Vlad III Dracula was no vampire. He did not drink blood or sleep in coffins. The truth is worse. He was a prince, a voivode of Wallachia, a small country trapped between the Ottoman Empire and the Kingdom of Hungary. Wallachia was not a nation in the modern sense. It was a battlefield, a buffer zone. Every generation, the armies of the great powers marched through its valleys and burned its villages. Vlad grew up as a hostage. His father sent him and his younger brother to the Ottoman court as political prisoners to guarantee the family's loyalty. Vlad spent years in captivity. He watched his brother be corrupted by the Sultan's court. He learned cruelty by observing his captors. When his father was murdered and his older brother buried alive, Vlad was released. He returned to Wallachia with a dark understanding of power. Fear was the only law that mattered. His signature method of execution was impalement. A large, blunt stake was inserted into the victim's body and then raised upright. Gravity did the work. Death could take hours, sometimes days. Vlad perfected the technique so that victims remained conscious as long as possible. He impaled men, women, children, nobles who betrayed him, peasants who stole, Ottoman soldiers who invaded his land, Saxon merchants who cheated him. Everyone was equal before the stake. He once invited hundreds of beggars and homeless people to a great feast in his castle. He fed them. He gave them wine. He asked them if they wanted to be free from suffering forever. When they said yes, he had the hall locked and burned to the ground. The Forest of the Impaled was his masterpiece. In 1462, the Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II, the conqueror of Constantinople, marched into Wallachia with an army of 90,000 men. What they found stopped them cold. A forest of 20,000 impaled corpses stretched for miles. Men, women, even infants. The smell was unbearable. The crows darkened the sky. The Sultan, a hardened warrior who had seen the worst of war, stared at the field in horror. He said, "No man can conquer the country of one who does such things." And he turned his army around. Vlad was eventually captured and imprisoned for 12 years. When he was finally released, he returned to Wallachia and reclaimed his throne. But his reign was short. In 1476, he was killed in battle, ambushed, and hacked to pieces. His head was sent to the Sultan and displayed on a stake in Constantinople. Vlad the Impaler, the son of the dragon, the monster who was once a frightened boy in a foreign court. History remembers his cruelty. It forgets the context. Wallachia was a land surrounded by enemies. Vlad's methods were horrifying, but they worked. He kept the Ottomans at bay with less than 30,000 men. The question that haunts us is the same one that haunts all the rulers on this list. Does survival justify the methods? Vlad would say yes, without hesitation. Number 1. Genghis Khan, the oceanic ruler. And now we reach the summit. The man who reshaped the world more than any other single human being in history. Not just a conqueror, not just a king, a force of nature. Temujin, Genghis Khan, the oceanic ruler, the universal lord. His early life was not the story of a prince. It was the story of a survivor. His father was poisoned by enemies when Temujin was 9 years old. His tribe abandoned his family to die on the steppe. He lived in poverty, hunted for food, fought his own brother for scraps. He was captured by a rival tribe and locked in a wooden collar. He escaped. He found his wife, who had been kidnapped. He began gathering followers. And then he began to conquer. Tribe by tribe, he united the Mongols. At a great council in 1206, he was proclaimed Genghis Khan, the supreme ruler of all the people of the felt tents. From that moment, the world would never be the same. Genghis Khan created the largest contiguous land empire in history, from the Pacific Ocean to the gates of Europe, from the Siberian tundra to the Persian Gulf. He conquered more territory in 25 years than the Romans did in 4 centuries. His military genius was unmatched. He reorganized the Mongol army into decimal units, breaking tribal loyalties. He promoted generals based on merit, not blood. He used spies, psychological warfare, and terror as weapons. Cities that surrendered were spared. Cities that resisted were annihilated. The destruction was industrial in scale. The Khwarezmian Empire, the most powerful Muslim state of its time, was erased from existence. Cities like Merv, Balkh, Nishapur were reduced to ash. In Merv alone, an estimated 700,000 people were killed. The irrigation systems that had sustained civilization for thousands of years were destroyed. The land never recovered. But Genghis Khan was not just a destroyer. He created the Silk Road, the greatest trade network in human history. He established religious freedom across his empire. He created a written legal code, the Yasa. He connected East and West, allowing ideas, technologies, and goods to flow between civilizations that had never communicated before. He was a mass murderer who also midwifed the modern world. His personal life was equally extreme. He had hundreds of wives and concubines. Genetic studies suggest that today, 1 in every 200 men alive is a direct descendant of Genghis Khan. His bloodline is the most successful in history. He died in 1227 during a campaign against the Western Xia. The exact cause of death is unknown. Some say illness. Some say he fell from his horse. Some say a captured princess killed him in the night. His body was returned to Mongolia. Soldiers killed everyone they encountered along the way. The funeral procession left a trail of corpses behind it. He was buried in an unmarked grave. The location has never been found. Rivers were diverted, forests planted, slaves executed, all to keep the secret. Genghis Khan, the man who came from nothing, the man who united a scattered people and turned them into the terror of the world. He killed millions. He also created the conditions for the Renaissance, for global trade, for the exchange of ideas that would eventually produce the modern world. Was he the greatest ruler who ever lived, or the greatest monster? Perhaps those two things are not as different as we would like to believe. 10 rulers, 10 titans, each one carved their name in a history not with ink, but with blood and iron. Ashurnasirpal II, who turned human skin into decoration and taught the world the power of terror. Qin Shi Huang, who unified China and buried scholars alive, who built wonders on mountains of bones. Caligula, who became a god while still breathing and showed Rome the madness that absolute power can unleash. Cambyses II, who conquered Egypt and then lost his mind in the desert, destroyed by his own arrogance. Nero, who watched Rome burn and played his lyre while his people died in flames. Attila the Hun, the scourge of God, who brought empires to their knees and died in his wedding bed. Ivan the Terrible, who killed his own son with his bare hands and built Russia on a foundation of terror. Timur, the Iron Cripple, who stacked skulls into towers and never lost a battle. Vlad the Impaler, who created forests of the dead and became the monster that still haunts our dreams. And Genghis Khan, who reshaped the world, who killed millions and created the modern era, whose blood runs in the veins of a significant portion of humanity. What do we make of these men? Were they evil? Were they products of their time? Were they necessary? History does not give us easy answers. What is clear is this: they were not ordinary. They did not think like ordinary people. They did not feel like ordinary people. They looked at the world and saw something different. They saw what it could be, and they were willing to pay any price, commit any act to make their vision real. The world we live in today was shaped by their hands, for better and for worse. They are the titans, the giants who walked the earth before us, whose shadows still stretch across the centuries. Their palaces are gone. Their armies are dust. Their empires have crumbled. But their names will never die.